We continue Elizabeth Lodor Merchant's introduction to her King Arthur and his Knights, based on Sir Thomas Malory's Morte d'Arthur. Stark tales of brute strength, courtly amours, religious ecstasy, a sense of social obligation, and visions of ideal justice emerge in the successive versions of the old tale. While you seize one aspect or another, it shifts under your grasp and takes on a different shape. In these variants, there may be seen the ideals of the successive times that produced them. Still another source of interest lies in the realization that these stories must have been a uniting influence in troubled medieval England. A Celtic king becomes the property of Saxon commons and Norman lords, and though each people may have claimed him as theirs, none the less he was a common standard, a rallying sign for a whole people. Stories about him were equally welcome in court and hovel. He gained a hold upon the affections and imaginations of the varied, complex people, exceeding in strength their devotion to the more real and tangible King Alfred. Alfred is a solid fact, not the fluid material of tradition. What he actually did and was must remain. Perhaps for a similar reason, the epic cycles of Alexander and Charlemagne lost their fascination, and they were brought into the sobering light of day. At all events, the Arthur story remains a triumphant, vitalizing force in the world of English literature. So, as I've pointed out earlier, there was no Camelot, there was no Holy Cup, but certain elements got added as the story was put in a Christian context. Some say it was an actual 500s king. Some say it was hundreds of years BCE where this originates, but nor was its virtue spent. In pre-Renaissance days, Milton dreamed of it as a subject to his life work. Public life claimed him, and the play was never written. The subject was a controlling life interest with Tennyson. As early as 1832, he published The Lady of Shalott, his first poem drawn from this source. In 1888, after labor of 46 years, he concluded his majestic cycle of the Idyllists. Matthew Arnold, Charles Algernon Swinburne, and William Morris are other famous 19th century poets who, responding to the attention of this romance, have contributed to the literature of the subject. Among the multiplied recitals, two are most significant for the general reader, those of Malory in the 15th century and those of Tennyson in the 19th. And I do intend to look to see if there's any Tennyson when I'm at the clearance and that sort of thing. I did see it at some point, and now I want it. It's not fair. Well, it is fair, but to Malory we owe the gift of the complete story in English, which differs from our own. More accurately, we should say that we owe it also to Caxton, whose scholarly discernment and devotion prompted the printing of Malory's book among the issues of his press at Westminster. From this source, chiefly modern writers have drawn their material. Oh, did I say that last sentence? I'm sorry. We have already alluded to the changes made in the progress of the story from time to time. Some of these changes have added material to new interest, have been swept into the current. The story of the Grail, for instance, seems to have appeared first in the version of Walter Map, or Mappus, a Welshman at the court of Henry II, who thus added a religious element to the tale. Changes in character interpretation and in underlying motives are very narrated in modern versions. In Tennyson's Idyllists of the King, a central theme wields the 12 poems into an epic in which we may see how profoundly Tennyson's thought was influenced by contemporary scientific revelations. He shows the slow progress of man in his development as an individual and as a social unit. teaching the world to strive for clearer vision and steadier purpose, steadfastness in spite of delay and error, firm in the belief that while the old order changeth, yielding place to new, it is still true that God fulfills himself in many ways, lest one good custom should corrupt the world. The Arthur story is classed as world literature. The term will bear emphasis. While it is true that all the world loves a story, it is also true that it loves particular stories above others. Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast, Puss in Boots, Jack the Giant Killer, dim and remote in origin, unknown whether childhood has its rightful heritage. What land has not its tales of fire-breathing dragons, enemies of mortals to be conquered only by superhuman godmen? The battle cries of Homer's heroes still ring in modern ears after 3,000 years of wars. Great chiefs withdrawn from mortal knowledge await the summons of their peoples alike in American Indian legends, in Teutonic sagas, and in Celtic prophecies. Celtic is sort of a division of Teutonic, but certain fundamental ideas and interest awaken response in men of all times and places. They survive all changes and accompany all migrations, bearing the testimony of the essential union of human sympathies. They are significant, too, of the limited range of man's activities. A few good themes cover broadly all the stories that have ever been told: war, love, adventure, domestic life, community organization. The ways of those considered to be gods and men furnish the material for most of them, and these interests are permanent, implicit in life. Like all other worldly literature, the Arthur story is woven of such threads, and such like them draws them threads from various lands and races. It is not strange that the resultant fabric is rich in pattern and color. Many hands have spun the thread and guided the weaving, and through the loom the fabric is still passing, at once a heritage from the past and a promise of beauty yet to be. Naturally, numerous versions for young people have been made. Elements of youth characterize all world literature, action rather than reflection, and a childlike directness enchain the attention of young imaginations. In King Arthur and his knights, these qualities are prominent and, combined with its happy phrasing, assure the popularity of this book. Now, the meme is from the 1927 version, and she was dead before this version came out. But perhaps, and this is what I believe, but consider the possibility of mythology directed by metaphysical experience with the actually spiritual, and perhaps that which is in inspired words, or even revealed words directly in the form of which they should be. So there's an importance in preserving mythology, even if not directly revealed or directly inspired, if inspired to a different degree, because certainly countless people have had some level of experience to give purpose and meaning